Welcome to Inland Empire Alive, bringing you issues, events, and perspectives from throughout San Bernardino and Riverside counties. I'm David Brady, and on today's show I'll talk to Carl Baker about his years as a local newspaper journalist and his current work as a city spokesman. That's today on Inland Empire Alive. Well, joining me now to talk about his long career as a newspaper journalist as well as his current role as a city spokesman is Carl Baker, the Public Information Officer for the City of Redlands. Carl, welcome to the program.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I would like to go all the way back to the beginning. How did you first become interested in being a journalist?
I have always loved to write, and a family member suggested to me that that was an avenue for me to be able to write. I was interested in public affairs. And so I attended first community college and then USC and graduated with a broadcast journalism degree. I wanted to go into radio. It shows you, I keep wanting to go into industries that are on their way out, I guess. But I ended up at a small community newspaper in the San Gabriel Valley, and then later at the Redlands Daily Fax.
And eventually I was the editor there, and I'm proud to say I was the longest serving
editor at the Redlands Daily Fax after the Moore family sold the newspaper. So,
what was that like, the era that you were there? Because this was pre
sort of internet, pre-social media, pre-AI and Facebook groups. This was when people really relied on newspapers for local news.
Exactly, and I lament the fact that a lot of communities, even at that time, there were a lot of small towns that did not have a intensely local newspaper like the Daily Fax or even the Sun or Press Enterprise. They relied more on maybe national or maybe they had a regional newspaper. But places like Redlands had a paper that was focused on Redlands, and people went to the paper for things like the local sports. You weren't going to get high school write-ups, not just scores, but write-ups on high school sports on a regular basis anywhere but a local newspaper. Obituaries, people would go there for the obituaries, but they also went there, I like to think, to find out what their city council was doing or what their school board was doing. That's news that's not available anywhere else. Even then, pre-internet, I think a local newspaper like Fax was providing a service that people weren't getting from the Los Angeles Times or even from the Sun or the Press Enterprise. So that was, I was proud to be a part of that. I mean, it was a real passion of mine to be able to be involved in local community and inform our local community that way.
I for about 30 years ago, I worked as a newspaper reporter too in the San Fernando Valley, and I recall every day was different. You never knew what was going to happen. I mean, a day would start out very dull, and then a massive news story would break out. It was really an exciting time to be part of that industry. Was it like that for you as well?
It was, and that's the other beauty of the journalism is that every day was different. There were certain things you knew to expect. I mean, every other Tuesday was a city council meeting, but when you're that intensely local, you might go from covering the train derailment and explosion in San Bernardino to the local school board meeting and what they're talking about there. So it was always there was always a little bit of excitement and also just the ability to kind of be a jack of all trades in a way. I always said, I'm not, even in my current role, I don't know everything, but I know where to find out. And that was kind of my journalism training too.
When you were in newspapers, are there particular stories that stand out either as big stories or memorable, not necessarily big in terms of, their news value, but maybe they had a really strong impact on the community or you as the reporter covering them?
Well, that one I mentioned, the train derailment, that was a real story. That was I think one of my very first stories as a journalist in Redlands, that a train had derailed in Muscoy, And then later on, triggered by that, there was a huge explosion. It took out a neighborhood. And that was quite an eye-opener for a very young, very green journalist who had come from Orange County. So I wasn't even familiar completely with the community at that time. Now lived in Redlands for more than 30 years, so it's a little bit more. It's my hometown now. Redlands had some unusual crime stories that were, and I hate to even bring him up, but we had a period where it seemed like for a small town, we were getting some of these sensational crime stories that you would think you'd find in a bigger city. And I kind of presided over a lot of that, not as a reporter necessarily, but as the editor at the paper.
Is there anything particularly you're most proud of in your time with the paper?
I think, I don't think of a particular story or anything. I think just keeping it so locally focused, being able to provide information to my community about the things that were going on in my community. Other papers could handle the regional stuff. We did some of that. We did, we had the AP Wire. We did run national news and state news, but really our bread and butter was being a very local newspaper. And I'm sad to say that, I think they tried, but a lot of that's just disappeared.
After these messages, we'll hear more about Carl's current role, 20 years as the City Public Information Officer for Redlands, when we come back.
Animal Services needs you. Do you love animals and are looking for a way to help the shelter? We have foster and volunteer opportunities year-round. We need foster parents who can advocate for their foster pets' adoption. The shelter has many dogs, cats, kittens, and puppies that could benefit from a foster home. Some animals, especially underage ones like Cole here, require more care than the shelter can provide. Most of the time, they only need a few weeks of TLC before they are ready to be adopted out. For more information, you can visit the Foster tab on www.sbcitypets.org. If you need help selecting a foster pet, email our foster team at fosterpet@sbcity.org. Want to say hi, Cole?
Well, I'm talking with Carl Baker, the former reporter and editor of the Redlands Daily Facts newspaper, who since 2004 has been the public information officer for the city of Redlands. What is that role like, and how difficult was it making the switch from reporter to spokesman?
In a lot of ways, it was not difficult at all. And I've always seen myself in this role as an advocate for the press and the media. I think the hardest part of that is that how much the media landscape has changed, and the learning curve for me anyway, in moving from primarily a media-focused position to one of the internet and social media and all of the other ways to try to reach people.
So are those challenges today? Because as you say, 20 years ago, you were probably talking to reporters from the Daily Facts.
Exactly.
And now you're up against misinformation in Facebook neighborhood groups and Instagram posts and AI and memes and things that may be just outright hoaxes. How do you battle against things like that?
Exactly. As I say, I was an advocate for journalists at the time. I understood what they were looking for. I understood from the city side how we wanted to talk to them. And that's not spin, but that's being able to put the city in the right light. Now it's a question of reaching out to people and finding out, where are you getting your information? Because it used to be that we knew that a lot of people were reading the local newspaper. People aren't doing that anymore. So where are they finding their information? And as you say, a lot of times it's misinformation, bad information, or it's at best maybe a rumor that has a basis in truth, and trying to navigate those waters now. It's a whole new world.
Does technology help? I mean, certainly it's made it faster, easier, and more efficient to communicate.
It's also made it more possible to directly reach out to the community. You don't have that gatekeeper, if you will. I respect journalists and I appreciate what they do, but I also know that if we were able to put out a direct message. We can tell people the message that we want them to hear, but it's a matter of, are they listening? Are they tuning into that venue? So I've done a lot of, whenever I do public speaking, I ask people, the last thing I do is I ask people, where are you getting your information? How do you learn about the things that are going on in the city? And is there some place where we aren't present that we should be, that we can get information to you? And most of the responses I get are kind of old media kind of things. Maybe that's a reflection of the groups that I'm talking to. But I hear things like newsletters and that's not where most people are showing their information now. So we certainly have a robust social media presence. We have a decent website. We have local cable TV that we are trying to expand on and reach out so that we're streaming into places where people are. But it's still always a challenge to try to reach those audiences, let them know what it is the city's doing. If they're getting their information from what their neighbors are saying, their neighbors are not necessarily any better informed than they are. So it's a matter of doing a lot of listening, trying to find those platforms where people are finding their information and then trying to be there.
Well, I'll ask you the same question from before the break. In your role as PIO, what have some of those biggest, most memorable incidents? I won't call them stories, but those sort of things you've had to handle in that capacity.
Well, the national events affect the local greatly. COVID was certainly a big challenge for small towns. Small towns with small businesses. We were very involved in trying to reach out with our local businesses and help them to survive COVID. Interestingly enough, our current city manager started in January of 2020, and in March of 2020, everything shut down.
Fire.
Yeah, everything shut down. And he did do a marvelous job kind of leading the city through those waters. And we came out in a very good position. We were financially well off, considering we had the budget discipline to come out of COVID with a reserve. And so we're very fortunate that is still, there's some residual of that. Those are the kinds of things. I had to learn about budget. I had to learn about police. I had to learn about fire. I had to learn about public works. It's, kind of the joy and all that. Have a challenge.
To shine laws and...
Exactly. It's the joy of the challenge of being a public information officer.
Well, before I let you go, I want to make sure we let people know how to find out everything happening within the City of Redlands. You can go
to cityofredlands.org. Carl Baker, it's been a pleasure you having on the show. All the best in the City of Redlands to you.
Thank you very much.
Visit iealive.com.